My name is Cristina Pastore and I'm one of the counsellors from the University of Western Sydney. I'm going to be giving you a brief on perfectionism, procrastination and managing time. Now, perfectionism is when people set unrealistic high standards on themselves and on others, and they're emotionally troubled by such unrealistic demands. There are generally a couple of ways of looking at perfectionism. These are adaptive and maladaptive. Now, both these forms of perfectionism have high standards, but it's the motivation behind these standards that sets them apart. So, adaptive perfectionism is when people set high standards, but they are realistically high standards. So for example, you might have somebody that might say, I'd like to get 90% in my thesis, and they receive 80%. More often than not, these people have a flexible approach, and most of all, they don't judge themselves in a negative manner for not having received 90% as opposed to 80%. They accept mistakes and can learn from the mistakes, and that's another defining factor, that life is a learning process. They are accepting of suggestions and they embrace them, and they don't evaluate themselves harshly as being failures. Mostly, people with adaptive perfectionism are able to enjoy life. Now, people who have maladaptive perfectionism are people who set unrealistic high standards, and they're quite inflexible in their approach. So generally, these people don't enjoy life too much because they're often feeling like failures. They are often believing that they are being judged negatively by others. For example, when they're handing in some work to supervisors, they might be expecting some praise for what they did instead of suggestions that supervisors often provide. And they might judge themselves harshly as a result. So instead of seeing suggestions as constructive criticism and how they can change the paper and or accept the challenge, they give themselves a harsh time and critically evaluate themselves. Now, maladaptive perfectionists are consumed usually with fear of making mistakes. And often these are the people that will procrastinate, fantasizing that if they leave the task till a later date, they can do it perfectly. They can do it as a one-off and have a perfect paper provided. Now, that's not reality-based. So, being a postgraduate student, it's a good idea to set high standards. It's a good idea to have high standards. But the idea is to turn the maladaptive high standards into adaptive forms of perfectionism. Some strategies to turning maladaptive forms of perfectionism into adaptive forms could be having a change of mindset. So rather than thinking being perfect and living life trying to prove yourself as being perfect or highly intelligent or highly capable, try to approach life as though it's an avenue for learning. That usually lessens the pressure, and you might derive some enjoyment from life as opposed to putting pressure on yourself, procrastinating and making it hard for yourself and others as well. So another point is to accept mistakes. So develop papers that are not perfect from the word go. See papers as a work in progress. View suggestions as ways of challenging your comfort zone and embrace the challenge. Another aspect is to develop a sense of personal best. So instead of competing or comparing yourself to other people, it's a good idea to just develop that personal best. Develop ways of saying, well, in what way have I improved from, say, a few months ago? Or how was this year's conference presentation in terms of the paper that I delivered better in comparison to the paper that I delivered 6 months ago or even a year ago? In what way did I improve? Maybe some ways you didn't, but maybe some ways you did. So focus in on that. Think about providing good enough work rather than no work at all, or asking for extensions. Asking for extensions lengthens the agony over writing a paper. So sometimes it's better to speed up the process and provide a good enough paper rather than no work at all. Maladaptive perfectionism is an anxiety-based response. You do need to treat it as an anxiety by developing or learning strategies to face your fear. Now, you might very well be able to do that on your own, or you may wish to consult a professional such as a counsellor or a psychologist. One aspect that postgraduate students face is that of procrastination. Procrastination is very common amongst the student population group, be it undergraduate or postgraduate or at any level. You might even find it with academic staff. Now, the thing is, it's very important to start realising your procrastination style. So, when you realise that you're not making progress and you start to wonder, what might be happening? Could this be that I'm procrastinating? You need to start thinking, well, what level of procrastination might be taking place? Procrastination can happen for lots of reasons. It could be that because of perfectionism, that there is a fear of making mistakes or fearing criticism from others. Or it could be that there's too much to study and you're not knowing where to start, feeling overwhelmed. You could be procrastinating because you're bored of study, or even you may be lacking motivation. In order to combat procrastination, it's important to catch yourself when you are avoiding study by analysing and saying, well, what am I doing? What am I entertaining instead of studying the way I need to be studying? Am I doing too much social media? Am I going out too much? Am I going out more often than I can afford to given the time that I have? Is it because of perfectionism? And then we know that we need to develop skills to face the fear because it is an anxiety-based response. Could there be that you're procrastinating because there's too much material and you don't know where to begin? The idea is to begin anywhere. As seeing yourself do some work is better than doing no work at all. That could have detrimental effects on your grades or on your enrolment. If you are bored, you may need to introduce regular breaks and rewards as forms of motivation. The other thing to consider is to actively limit time wasters. So be very aware of what your procrastination style is and limit those activities. Don't erase them at all from your life, but just provide limits. The other aspect I want to talk about is that of managing your time. Now, managing time, as you well know, it's essential for postgraduate students. Not managing your time well can make or break the grade. Some tips for time management are make sure that you develop schedules to keep up with your progress. So that means every week you might have a glimpse of the coming week and make a plan to approach your study. Make sure that you approach all the aspects you need to for that week. Don't forget to be flexible about it. Be adaptive, perfectionist about it. The other tip is to study often. Again, it's one of those aspects. Don't leave it till a time when you think it's going to be perfect. Make sure that you approach study on a regular basis and begin writing as early as possible. So what you want to do is develop habits. Create the habituation of regularly attending to your study. It doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing. You have to go to the same chapter of your thesis. You can go here or there, but approach study on a regular basis. The other one is to prioritize important tasks first, of course, because of priority, that you need to hand in things at a particular time, at a particular deadline. And also prioritize the most difficult tasks first, as they are the ones that will take longer to complete. And also, they are the ones that will emotionally weigh you down the most. So once you get a heavy weight out of the way, it becomes easier to do other tasks that perhaps might be less demanding or equally so. Now, another tip is that you make sure that you set regular uninterrupted time on a daily basis to your postgraduate task. You might think about spending 1 hour blocks. You might be able to set half-hour blocks or even 15-minute blocks in order to do some work. You can do quite a lot in 15 minutes. You might be able to do a brief plan, a brief outline of a section. You might be able to review a page that you've written. You might be able to construct a paragraph or keep on working on a paragraph that you've been working on. The idea is to work to a timer. Focus on your work, stop when the timer says to stop, have a quick break, maybe 5 minutes, praise yourself. Don't forget to praise the effort, praise the progress that you're doing, and then return to your work. Another aspect is to handing regular good enough work to your supervisor. So rather than waiting for that time that you're going to do a perfect job, think about writing a segment, handing it to your supervisor, getting feedback, and then making an amendment. So see it as a working progress, not as a perfect item that you're going to do and put away for quite some time. Think about changing the time period. So speed up the process of writing, handing things in, making amendments, writing, handing things in and making amendments, and so on. With time management, it's also a good idea to focus on small steps, not on the end goal. It's like climbing a mountain. It becomes daunting to think of yourself being right up the top. So think of yourself taking one step at a time and focus on the progress. Praise yourself for the progress and see life as a learning process. Now, with any of these topics that I talked about today, you might be able to find further information in the Counselling website in the section that's called Study, Money and Life Skills. You will find modules of these aspects of study, plus other aspects that might be very helpful to help you in your progress. Also, if you want to, you may want to make a time with a counsellor and come and see a counsellor just to talk about your individual progress and how to actually find study a lot more rewarding. Most of all, from the Counselling Service, we wish you a very successful and rewarding journey in your postgraduate studies.